Anyway, g'day, my name is Tim Koopmans. As you can tell from my accent, I'm from Australia. And I'm actually the director of load testing at Tricentis. Tricentis being the #1 continuous test platform. And so I look after load testing. You might be wondering, what is load testing? I guess I've got the definition up here on the screen. So load testing is simply putting demand on a system and measuring it for performance. That's what we do. I wanted to talk today about SAP Fiori since we're at the SAP conference, but obviously we do load testing of all different types of web-based applications. But SAP Fiori is interesting because on the product architecture page, they've actually listed that we want to reimagine the SAP user experience with SAP Fiori. So they've got a really strong focus on user experience or UX. So has anyone seen that before? Okay, so this is product, and this is user experience. And Heinz reimagined sort of the ketchup, or we call it tomato sauce back at home, but they reimagined how the product should look and feel. I mean, we had the traditional bottle where you'd pour it out, you'd have a lot of difficulty getting the sauce out of the bottle. And then they went for UX where they flipped the bottle upside down, turned it into a plastic container, inverted all the labels, and you could apply like a controlled amount of force to get the sauce out. So that's a good example of what designing for UX is about. But of course, I'm kind of interested in the performance of the sauce, okay? So this guy, Newton, right? So he came up with this concept of Newtonian fluids. So Newtonian fluids are things like water, oil, where they're kind of like if you apply a linear force to them, you get as much force as you put in. So if you apply 2 times force to a bottle of water, you're going to get like 2 times the volume coming out. That's how linear fluids sort of work. The thing about tomato sauce is it's a non-Newtonian fluid. So tomato sauce, toothpaste, mayonnaise, you'll get where this is going. But they don't work in a linear fashion. Okay, so they actually have 3 things that kind of affect them. They have the force that's applied. They're also affected by the speed at which the force is applied, and generally speaking, they're impacted by time. So to give you an example, you've probably all felt that when you use the tomato sauce bottle, when you give it a good squeeze, you have to use like a fair bit of squeeze at the start, and then you kind of have to back off. And that's this curve here. So the more force you apply, the thinner the sauce becomes, and that's just what a non-Newtonian fluid behaves like. So this is like an exponential curve here. So the force delta here is like 1,000 times. So what normally happens is something like this. Maybe. It didn't work. One of my presentations never worked. Anyway, you can imagine sauce going everywhere. That's what happens when you squeeze it too hard. And the other thing is, if you apply time, if you just invert a bottle and let gravity do its work, you should get something like this. Okay, so these are different properties of tomato sauce, and you may be wondering, what's that got to do with the price of fish? What's that got to do with performance? I guess in performance or in load testing, this is what we're always asking ourselves, what could go wrong? That's what load testing is about. Load testing is about risk management. This guy didn't do very good risk management before he chose to leave the vehicle, the only driver. And obviously bad things happen. So this is what load testing is about. It's about identifying risk to production applications and looking at what can go wrong in production. So how does that apply to performance? Well, using SAP Fiori as an example, the biggest thing that we know about performance, or the thing that everyone has an intuitive feel for, is response time. I mean, we all know when a site is taking a long time to load. So this is simulating a 4G network, looking at SAP Fiori, for example, and it's taking about 20 to 30 seconds for the page to load. So this is super frustrating for customers. Of course, if you imagine you've got distributed warehouses out there, you've got people that are trying to do their job, they might be on mobile devices, they're trying to pick and pack orders and do requisitions, that sort of thing. Even like a 30 to 60 second sort of delay can really slow down the business unit. And of course, response time isn't the only thing that we care about in performance. There's also other dimensions. So things like concurrency, the number of users doing the same thing at the same time. You might be interested in, say, transaction rate, like how many orders are you processing per second, for example. So these are all sort of aspects of performance that everybody cares about. The other aspect that we care about is availability. So once again, you can't really escape this. Everybody knows about availability issues. When the site is down, SAP Fiori does a pretty good job of letting you know. But there are many examples that I could pull from the news about where things have gone wrong. So KFC fell over in Bristol, the logistics system behind that. I won't name the logistics system, but you can imagine who it is. And obviously no one could deliver chickens to any of the stores, so they had to shut down all the stores, and then everybody tweets about it. So generally, whenever you have availability issues, everybody knows about it, or everybody tweets about it. Reliability is a different story because everyone's impacted by it. Once again, if I look at the SAP Fiori trial website, it's littered with HTTP 500s, and you may think, well, do we care about HTTP 500s? HTTP 500s means something went wrong with the request and the response that came back from the server. So yes, we do care about that, and especially more so when we're seeing this sort of thing under load. The other downside to reliability is that, everybody knows about reliability issues. I mean, we have, there can be some sort of curly things here. I mean, can anyone tell me what's wrong with this page here? Sorry? Yeah, exactly. So this is like a classic 32-bit integer overflow. And so it's pretty cool for this person who's now got 42 billion accrued hours. But obviously this is where performance issues get kind of tricky, because the server might be responding properly, might be giving you HTTP 200s, but you're kind of stuck because you're getting the wrong data back anyway. So this is another important aspect of performance testing. And the last thing that we really care about is scalability. So scalability is really just a modern term for capacity management. This is where time is money. So you want to know how fast, or if your application can scale to meet unanticipated workload in production. Likewise, you want to know if you can scale back from that so that you're not leaving orphaned resources hanging out there in the cloud costing you a fortune. There's a really good blog post here from segment.com where they're wasting around $1 million per year on cloud resources due to just having a lot of orphaned resources out there. So scalability is another important dimension. So even if you go to, once again, the product architecture site and you look at the plan section on SAP Fiori, there's some big hints there that you should be considering load testing. They'll talk about, that you need to plan your system landscape. So they're talking about system requirements that you might need. They have a server calculator, which you can plug in some figures, and it gives you like a rule of thumb, like how many servers you need to service X amount of people. And likewise, what you need to do for, say, mobile performance. But of course, you can't just trust a calculator. And this is the whole point of load testing. You need to be able to test these systems, preferably in a development environment, but also maybe in the production environment as well. And that's what we do with Tosca Flood. So Tosca Flood is really focusing on delivering great performance on many devices. And we do that by distributing, my animation doesn't work here, but we do that by distributing load across multiple cloud-based resources from multiple geographic regions around the world. So we're simulating the load of hundreds, if not thousands of users. And SAP Fiori is a really good example of that because it's browser-based. It's something that we can do from the cloud. Tosca Flood also helps you find bottlenecks before your customers do. So this is a really important outcome because obviously you want to be able to do this in a controlled environment that you can repeat and then isolate and hopefully eliminate from your production environment. The other thing that Tosca Flood does is it helps you build reusable test automation. So by that, I mean, if you haven't already checked out what Tosca can do, please go and have a look at the demo after that. But you can basically build reusable pieces of test automation at the functional test level, and then you can reuse those same test assets in a load test scenario. So there's no sort of like re-scripting involved or separate teams doing different things. You can basically have one script to sort of rule them all. The other thing that Tosca Flood will help you with is getting started with continuous load testing. So it's really important to think about load testing not as a one-off activity, because if you only do it once or twice a year, then the number of decisions that you're making in regards to performance is going to be quite limited, and chances are you're going to be shipping sort of poor performing products to production. So the more times you can test, obviously the better the empirical baseline that you can make an assessment of performance against, and also the smaller that the delta is in terms of the changes that are happening to your production application. So it makes it easier to actually find performance defects. And you can do all of that from Tosca. And the last thing that Tosca Flood really helps you with is actually diagnosing performance issues under load. So it's no good being able to run a load test and then have to look at the results after it's happened. Of course, you want to be able to look at the load test results as the test is happening. And we have a whole bunch of different features that just help you drill down into you know, what's actually going wrong under load. One of those things is screenshots. That makes it's a really useful tool to be able to see, you know, at what part in the system under test it's starting to fail, so you can get a feel for what's going on. So that's all the time I have. It was only 10 minutes. I know a lot of you here are eagerly waiting for the guitar draw, but yeah, are there any questions about Tosca Flood or load testing in general?
All right, let's hear it for Tim, everybody.
Thank you.
Come on, you can do better than that, a little more. There we go.